Hi, I'm Keith McCullough. Welcome back to another edition of Real Conversations, where it's my pleasure to welcome back Neil Howe. He's a demographer, a historian, an author, amongst many things. I think he can teach us a lot today on different topics, including the Federal Reserve, healthcare, real estate, and obviously the politicalness of it all. So Neil, I wanted to start first. Thanks for making some time again.
Yeah, sure.
We had a lot of great feedback on your first time with us, and since then, I've spent a lot of time using your data. You know, The Fourth Turning, as you know, is one of my favorite books of all time. Demography, I still think, is the tail wagging the dog on a lot of the things that we get out there, which are born out of central plannings to solve for something that I don't think you can solve for. But we do have a slide deck that really kind of focuses on the baby boom generation in this country, but we're really honing in on that 35 to 54-year-old spending cohort, and how we think so much of our economics and our political dialogue have to do with something that we're not going to get back, which is the 1990s. So I want to kind of use that as an opening volley and see how you'd react to that.
Well, the big news demographically when it comes to aging is obviously the boomers are over that age bracket now, and they represent a huge growth in the 60-plus population now, and we see that happening. I suppose the good news of the silver lining on that is that they're working longer, they're employed longer, particularly at the high end. At the low end, they're retiring early on DI, so giving rise to that crisis. Well, there really is a very interesting spreading out among boomers, first wave to last. And the last wave boomers are really much more spread out in terms of income and wealth. This is why the non-college really are retiring early on DI, and the upper end, they're working more than ever, and they're not retiring.
Which gives birth to DI not being able to be funded.
Totally. Well, that is the new crisis. DI, the OASDI trustees report just came out this morning. And,
was it this morning?
Yeah,
okay.
This morning. And
I think only you're staring at that, but go ahead.
Well, yes, the wonks among us. So Social Security, the retirement part is in bad shape as ever. You know, it's going to go under in the 2030s. The DI is going to go under next year.
Really?
So it's got to be solved during an election year, which is going to be really interesting. They got to find out some new money. Obviously, the quick fix is just to pump stuff from OASI into DI and just kick the can down the road. But it has to get through Congress somehow.
So this will be a live ticking presidential debate topic, obviously.
It's going to be really interesting to see people dodge and feint, and right. So how that goes. The bracket you're talking about, 35 to 55, is right now the Generation X sweet spot. Those are all Xers, right? They're born in the 60s and 70s. They are a little bit of a demographic dip, right? A big dip in terms of births, but to some extent largely filled in by immigration. This is the largest immigrant generation per capita born in the 20th century.
In the Gen X bracket.
Yeah, these in the 80s and 90s, these are the young men, the young adults and families that were coming over. Millennials are going to be a declining immigrant generation, and that's already happening. Since 2000, since the Great Recession, immigration has declined sizably, particularly from Latin America. We're telling all of our clients that this decline is not temporary. It's not caused by the economy. It's going to be long-term. And for the next several decades, we're never going to experience immigration rates like the 80s and 90s. The reason is declining fertility rates in Latin America. Latin American families are much smaller now. And the fertility rate climbed very steeply in the 1980s, which means that if you are in the 15 to 35-year-old age bracket, this is the high immigrant. We know this is always the age bracket that immigrates or immigrates. They come from much smaller families now, which is why Latin American immigration is way down now, and the largest minority group for immigrants now for the past 2.5 years is Asians. Almost no one knows that.
Wow.
This is an interesting backdrop to the whole political firestorm of Donald Trump and everyone else talking about rapists and so on coming over our border. What's rarely noticed is that the whole tectonics of immigration is decisively shifting in a way which is going to be with us for some time. So Gen X is going to remain a high immigrant generation, and they're going to age as a uniquely high immigrant generation.
Yeah.
And they're going to be regarded as that by younger generations. It's sort of a...
That's interesting because it's also, I mean, if you think I'm a Gen X, and
right.
It's also the least racist, it's the least affected by a lot of our parents or our grandparents' issues and a lot of these topics. You've said that to have the change, and maybe if you can outline the timing of the next political shift away from the baby boom presidents, that there has to be somebody in the next generation. Obama might have missed the window, he may have not.
It's already happening. I mean, I would argue that Obama actually was our first Generation X president.
Right.
He was born in 1961, which is the way we calculate is probably the first birth year of Generation X.
Okay.
My test of a Gen Xer is, do you personally remember John Kennedy's assassination?
Okay.
Do you remember the American High? Do you remember what happened even in early childhood before everything went crazy in the 60s? Boomers do, Xers didn't. Mm-hmm. Another good test is, do you remember, Jim, Jimmy, or Janice when they were still alive? I guess that's another good test.
You got me.
A boomer does.
Yeah.
An Xer says, "Oh yeah, I remember those rock stars back when."
Yeah.
But the point is, boomers came of age in the 60s. Xers were kids.
Yeah.
And all of the great iconic leaders of Generation X were born in the early 60s, 61, 62, 63, 64. Michael Jordan, Michael J. Fox, Michael Dell, think of all the Michaels.
Yeah.
And Doug Coupland, who wrote the book, Generation X, giving the name to this generation, was born in 1961, just like Obama.
Wow.
And Obama himself always talks about himself as a post-boomer generation, child of divorce, child of a broken family, right?
Yeah.
So the real question, though, as we move ahead to 2016, is Gen X really going mainstream? And here we see a really fascinating partisan split, okay?
Really?
Well, think about it. If you look at all of the candidates born 1961 and later, look on the Democratic side. How many did you see?
I don't know.
None, right?
Okay, that's why I don't know the answer.
Well, you got the former governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley, but I mean, that's kind of, you're talking about a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
The only candidates are people Hillary's age or older, or maybe you have a few late wave boomers like Andrew Cuomo or Rahm Emanuel. But the point is, there's no one younger. Now
I think you got to go more left and older. Isn't Bernie more left?
Yeah, Bernie Sanders he's
he?
actually silent. He was born in 1942. He actually remembers World War II. So
do you have to remember everyone's birthday?
I study generations. When it comes to, that's actually how I think about people.
No,
I think about how old they were when.
Right.
That's important for me.
So the Republican side, I assume, has more.
Republican side, they have
more than 0.
10 or 12 nationally recognized names who were born in 1961 and later.
Wow.
I mean, think of all the governors. Mm-hmm. Think of Marco Rubio. Think of Ryan. And just think of all the governors who are running. New Jersey, Wisconsin, South Carolina. You just go down all these people. Louisiana. Mm-hmm. So here's the interesting thing. This is going to be a reversal of 2008 when you had this very young Democratic candidate running against a much older, John McCain, right? It's going to be a reversal. I think what you're going to have is a much younger Republican candidate, perhaps of immigrant minority background.
That's really interesting.
Running against a much older white Democratic candidate. And but here's the clue. This group, born in the 60s, is a uniquely conservative cohort group.
Yeah, can you go through how, because you have such rich demographic data, can you go through how you tabulate that?
We have on our website, and you can actually look this up on saculumresearch.com, just go into our research part, but we actually have an American leadership database, and we put in there 35,000 names. This is every governor, congressman, senator, Supreme Court justice, president, everyone since 1789. Right? So it's all there. And you can go in and have user-defined queries about different cohort groups or different congresses, seeing when cohort groups actually peaked in their power. But if you go in and you actually define born 1961 and later, you will find that something like 65% of those politicians, wherever they serve, governors, congressmen, whatever, a few senators, are Republican.
Really?
Which is one of the most lopsided partisan advantages for such a large cohort group in any cohort group born in the 20th century. Who are these people born in the 60s? They came of age during the Reagan Revolution.
Wow. And
these are the ones, right? First of all, they're natural Republicans in a certain sense. Left alone as kids, they were the ones that got the latchkey guides. They were the ones forced to read Judy Blume. They had no illusions that anyone was going to take care of them.
Star Wars.
Curmudgeonly, hard Scrabble, free agents. They expect, right? I mean, they don't look for handouts. They don't look for anyone to help them.
You're speaking to me, man. Keep going.
And they're naturally cynical and distrustful about big institutions. They're not so much big on the whole moral agenda, right? They're not so much on the culture war side of the Republican Party, but they're really there on the leave me alone, I can do it myself. They are DIY Republicans. And they are the ones now increasingly staying home to take care of their kids. They're the ones who represent a real withdrawal from the labor force post-2008. And they are the ones who are hardest hit by the Great Recession.
Is this why I have an increasing amount of, even from where I went to school, which has the left of left. I mean, in Connecticut, we don't have to name names in terms of institutions, but you went there too.
Yeah.
But I'm having an unbelievable amount of people ask me if Trump is for real. Does he represent the DIY, even though like anyone who actually knows may not consider it the perfect DIY capitalist, but he really is an independent.
He is a boomer who speaks, who I think, whose message resonates widely with Gen Xers. And the reason is because he's so irreverent, he's so politically incorrect, he is so unplugged. And they love that.
To an extreme.
Yeah,
so
to an extreme. It's kind of exaggerated. It's like, Hulk Hogan or something running for president. Remember Jesse Ventura?
Yeah.
Remember who actually was very popular among young Gen X voters back in the day. But he represents that side. I'm gonna say it with a lot of attitude, in your face, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I think it really appeals. The thing about Gen Xers is they've never trusted any of these institutions.
Never.
So they represent this giant wrecking ball, and whichever party, and they're completely unaffiliated. They're the independent voter, right? And so whichever party can grab a hold of this wrecking ball, just bash down.
Do you know what percentage of people who would call themselves libertarians, forget Tea Party, or any way that you could characterize it, are Gen X?
Let me put it this way. The highest natural, Gen Xers have a higher share of any other generation who would naturally fall into most of the attributes we would call libertarian.
Okay.
I mean, they're the ones, for instance, most in favor of gun ownership or opposed to gun control laws. You know? And this is typical Gen Xer. I used to consult for a gun manufacturer, and I remember the one commercial which really hit Gen Xers better than any other was this wonderful ad, which I'm sure will resonate with you, but it's this guy out in the wilderness. He says, I run alone, I bike alone, I trek alone, but with my Smith & Wesson, I'm never alone. So that's the ultimate Gen Xer ad, right? It appeals to
big
that.
Time.
Yeah,
big time. And we've morphed from the being alone, being independent, don't give me a hand.
Well, millennials, of course, coming along, and they're the generation of community and plugging into each other, and that's completely different territory.